Told you it'd be easy.
I recently spent a decent amount of time with the Battlefront 2 beta, and I thought I'd share my 2 cents on the game. As a fan of the 2015 game, it's fair to say that I had pretty high hopes for the sequel, and what I wanted to find out most from playing this beta is whether or not DICE have been able to expand on what the first game did well. Now, while this video isn't going to cover everything that's in the game, because obviously what was playable was only a very small slice of the full game, I would like to discuss what I liked about Battlefront 2, what I didn't, what the biggest changes are, what its biggest problem is, and also if I think DICE has successfully fixed what the original game didn't do well. There's a lot to talk about, but I think this is the best place to start. Does Battlefront 2 improve on the original game's shortcomings? So the 2015 game was heavily criticised for not having enough content, or having a deep and compelling gameplay loop to keep players coming back. On top of that, it had an outdated DLC strategy that ultimately fragmented the online community. This resulted in a large portion of the player base moving on very quickly, particularly on PC. For me personally, I wasn't that disappointed with the level of content in the first game. Sure, it would have been nice to have more weapons and a progression system, but that wasn't enough to turn me off. My biggest issue was the DLC strategy. Adding new maps and modes to an online game is great, but only if everybody can access them. Locking this content behind a paywall is how many first-person shooter titles in the past have handled their DLC. Call of Duty predominantly still does it this way, but it's a terrible way for growing and maintaining a player base, especially for new games. Battlefront 2 is not making this mistake again. All new maps, modes, weapons and heroes will be free to download, and this will ensure that the community stays together and that game lobbies are as populated as possible. Another issue with the first game was the amount of content. The marketing material has already made a point of how much bigger this new game is, roughly 3 times the size, and it's not just the number of maps and vehicles that's increased either. Battlefront 2 has lots more to do in-game when it comes to progression, and this is immediately apparent from playing the beta. From weapon upgrades to an overhauled star card system and unique classes, both of which also extend to vehicles, there's a lot more to consider when jumping into a game. In the original Battlefront, everybody essentially played as the same soldier, and apart from the basic star card system, there wasn't really many options for customizing your loadout. Now you have to choose from one of 4 different infantry classes, each with their own unique abilities and weaponry. On top of that, the new star card system has a ton of options to customize your loadout further, adding a significant level of depth over the first game. Vehicle and hero power-ups on the battlefield have been removed entirely in favor of a more traditional points-based reward system. During a game, you'll earn battle points for things like getting kills and playing the objective. These points don't roll over from match to match, and they're intended to be spent during each game on vehicles, more powerful characters, and hero units. Some of these items don't cost many points, like the gunship. On the other hand, hero units, which are the most expensive, cost you a lot, and you'll need to be performing at least half decently to earn enough points to unlock them. They're not impossible to earn, even for an average player like myself, but you'll have to wait until the end of the match before you have enough points for them. I found that sometimes it was better to hold onto your points anyway, so that you can have a hero late in the game. For example, in the beta, the final objective in the Galactic Assault game mode is for the attacking side to capture a throne room. At this point, the map becomes much more confined and players tend to bunch up, so heroes like Darth Maul, who can do a lot of damage in close quarters, can be really useful in these situations. So it can definitely be worth holding onto your points until the most opportune moment to bring out a hero or a more powerful unit. This point system does change the core gameplay quite a bit from the original. I found myself focusing a lot on grinding out points to unlock certain things, particularly in the Starfighter Assault mode where all the hero ships are just so damn cool. I personally like this type of system because it gives you a personal goal in each game on top of the team objective to aim for, but I can totally see how some people would be frustrated by it because it mainly rewards the best players with the coolest and most powerful toys. Outside of matches, there's a new progression system that awards you with credits and loot crates. Yes, unfortunately there are loot crates in here too. Now normally I like loot crates so long as they only contain cosmetic items, but the loot crates in Battlefront 2 contain everything from new star cards to weapon unlocks to scrap, which can be used to craft weapon attachments. You can purchase additional crates with in-game credits too, and although there wasn't an option to purchase them with real money in the beta, it will apparently be possible at launch or sometime afterwards. This is definitely one aspect of the game that I feel is a big misstep, and it's disappointing to see this game follow in the footsteps of Call of Duty when so much effort has been made elsewhere to improve things. It also means that depending on the drop rate of certain items, they may be very difficult or nearly impossible to unlock, even with hundreds of hours of game time or a significant financial investment. Call of Duty has included weapons in supply drops in the last few games, and the chances of getting these is so low in some cases that it has put many people, including myself, off entirely. You do earn daily crates, which increases your chance of unlocking powerful items, and it's a nice incentive to keep playing regularly, but it's unclear if this will be in the full game or if the drop rates will be different to what was in the beta. At this stage we don't have any more details on this system and how it will affect the meta long term, but I'm skeptical at best. The other issue I have with the progression system is how potentially unbalanced it is. As you rank up, you unlock more star card slots, allowing you to equip many more abilities. The disparity between new players and people who've been playing for 15 to 20 hours and more can potentially be quite large. It's hard to know exactly how much of an advantage many of the star cards provide without statistical data, but some, such as the one which makes targeting you harder in Starfighter Assault, clearly give you an edge. If this indeed is how the progression system works in the full game, then multiplayer could become very inaccessible for new players only a few months after launch. DICE really haven't been very clear with how this system works. It's possible that as you rank up, the drop rates on certain items becomes more frequent, or potentially at a certain rank you're even guaranteed to unlock certain items. But without any kind of clarification at all, the community at this stage seems to be very upset with this system. Now, moving on to gameplay. All the new classes, abilities, and weapons add a lot of variety to each map. It's hard to get a clear picture of how diverse things will be once everybody learns what the best items and combinations are, and for sure there were already certain weapons that people were gravitating to, but at least at this early stage it's a big departure from the original. Being able to pick a class and tailor your abilities for specific scenarios or situations adds some much needed strategy too. This emphasizes the greater need for teamwork, as each class has clear strengths and weaknesses. None of them have a Swiss Army knife toolset, so having a balanced team makes more sense than everybody just running the assault class. Gunplay feels very similar to the first game, although playing in first person supposedly gives you better accuracy. I played in both third and first person, and I personally thought that first person was more accurate, although without any game data this is impossible to verify. It certainly did feel more comfortable for precise aiming, and I thought that it helped with long range gunfights a little too. It wasn't dramatically different to third person though, and of course third person still has its advantages, but at least first person felt viable, and that's a big positive because it was a bit of a wasted feature in the first game. So let's talk about the game modes that were available. There were 4 modes in the beta: Galactic Assault, Starfighter Assault, Strike, and Arcade, but for this video I'll be focusing on the online modes only, and that's the first 3. I spent most of my time in Galactic Assault and Starfighter Assault. Strike was fun, and the Takodana map looks like it was ripped straight out of The Force Awakens, but the smaller size of the map, the lower number of players, the infantry only gameplay, and the Capture the Flag game mode didn't feel anywhere near as epic as the other 2. Galactic Assault, on the other hand, feels like a proper chaotic battle, a lot like Walker Assault in the original game. This is an excellent way to see how all the new classes and vehicles work together in one big mode, and it's obvious why they chose this for the beta. My personal feeling is that these types of game modes, where the objective makes contextual sense within the Star Wars universe, are much more fun than typical first-person shooter modes like Capture the Flag and Team Deathmatch. Galactic Assault's objectives, at least based on the one scenario that was playable in the beta, make perfect sense, and it's definitely a very immersive game type. There were lots of different vehicles and power units, including heroes, to try in this mode. My initial impression was that the heavy class was the strongest, as lots of players seemed to be using it. I also spent a lot of my time using this class because the 2 guns available seemed to need less hits to kill, particularly at range. I also like the abilities of this class more than the others. The shield ability in particular is very effective. Some people have been complaining about grenade spam, and while I did get killed a few times by unavoidable explosions, I didn't think it was overly problematic. Having said that, I'm not a huge fan of regenerating grenades. The cooldown on them is quite long, but even still I'm not sure it's necessary. I think 1 grenade per life or even a longer cooldown might help reduce the spamminess, but I guess we'll have to wait and see if it's an issue in the other maps and modes. Overall though, I think the changes made to the combat work well. The gunplay feels just as good as the first game, there's a decent level of depth and strategy now, and no one is wasting time camping those hero power-ups. The other mode I spent a lot of time in was Starfighter Assault. In fact, I spent almost as much time with this game type as with Galactic Assault and Strike combined. Put simply, it's a huge improvement over the original. The controls for starters feel much tighter and responsive, and as a result, crazy dogfights are much more common. Flying in tight spaces actually feels possible this time round, and I really like the changes that they've made to the aiming system. Gone is the auto lock-on mechanic from the original game, now it's totally up to you to track the target. There's a little circle reticule now that indicates if you need to lead the target and by how much. This simple device, along with the tighter controls, makes the whole experience feel so much more engaging than the original Fighter Squadron mode did. What really makes this mode more enjoyable than the original, along with the improved controls, is both the map design and the additional variety in ship choice. The map in the beta was set in and around a huge Trade Federation space station that you can fly in and out of. This allows for some pretty hairy dogfights, and it feels so much more like an epic space battle than anything from the first game. There were 3 different ships available on each side, not including 2 types of hero class, and they all felt unique with clear strengths and weaknesses, and I honestly had a hard time picking a favourite. The hero ships feel powerful, but they're not as indestructible as they were in the first game. I tried all 4 and I liked all of them, but the standout for me was either Poe's X-Wing or the Slave One, simply because of its blaster sound and the huge explosion its grenade makes. I actually think that they could be a little bit harder to earn. Quite often I had the points for them, but they were unavailable because they were already in use. The problem is you still earn points while flying in the hero ships, and because it's so easy to rack up lots of kills and big points, you could often just jump straight back into a hero ship after you died, so I think the amount of points required to use them could use a bit of a tweak. Overall though, I think Criterion have done a stellar job with this component of the game, and I can't wait to see what the other space battles in the full game look like. I guess my only other real concern at this stage, apart from the progression system, is if DICE has gone too far in the opposite direction with this game. The first game was clearly dumbed down to be more accessible for casuals, and as a result it turned a lot of experienced first-person shooter players off. This game has a lot more for veteran players, but in turn has become way less accessible. If Call of Duty and Battlefield sales are anything to go by, then this probably won't affect EA's bottom line, and we won't know for sure if this will have any impact on the game's lifespan until many months after launch. It will be interesting to see how the casual audience reacts to the change in direction though, and if that will influence any design decisions moving forward. Despite the issues though, I really enjoyed what I've played so far, and I'll definitely be picking it up at launch, so stay tuned for a full review. If you have any questions, leave those for me below, and also let me know if you'll be picking this up too. If you enjoyed this video, consider dropping me a like, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe for more Battlefront content, but otherwise, thanks for watching.